So, while the Sega Mega Drive, or Sega Genesis, however you want to call it, was doing really well for Sega as a console, Sega wanted to work with some brand new technology. The newest stuff was CD-ROM technology. And while it may sound like I'm talking about the Sega Saturn and just named it wrong, no, this is the Sega CD. It was more or less an expensive as hell CD drive that attached to the Sega Genesis and allows the Genesis to actually play CD-ROM based games, which was kinda awesome. Well, it was supposed to be awesome. However, the Sega CD was just too expensive and lacking many games that interested a lot of gamers. The Sega CD at launch was expensive. In fact, everything I read up on suggests the add-on was more expensive than the original console. And I get it, the TurboGrafx, a competitor console, was doing something similar. The Sega CD also added a ton more memory. But the TurboGrafx failed as a whole. Also, I found out recently that the TurboGrafx, at least the American version, not the PC Engine, but the TurboGrafx, came out in 1989, meaning I'm as old as the TurboGrafx. While the TurboGrafx did fail spectacularly, the Genesis worked out, of course. The Sega CD, however, fell into obscurity. Well, it's time to look at the games and see if it was really worth the price at the end of the day. After all, hardware is only as good as the software, right? So let's take a look at some of the games on the add-on itself, excluding Sonic CD, which will get its own in-depth review later. So let's do it. Let's take on the Sega CD! So let's look into the platformers first, and outside of the Sonic CD, there was only really one that I saw interested me. And it's a game that I saw about back in the day, Wild Woody. Wild Woody is an interesting game. A platformer that stayed exclusive to the Sega CD even after all these years. Well, it can honestly stay that way. The story is that a totem of mythical powers is split up into pieces. The pieces fly into different comics and pictures. The bottom of the totem brings Woody, a nearby pencil, to life to collect the pieces and more or less save the day. Woody seems more like a parody of The Mask from Jim Carrey, but less funny and more annoying. Too much energy for me personally. Then the game actually starts. You are a pencil. You can jump. You can draw as your main abilities. You can jump on enemies and erase them as they're all drawings. But it doesn't work. Rather, it only works part of the time. I don't know if you need to be exact or what, but a lot of the time, I can't actually erase them. When I do, it's great. When I don't, I'll end up taking a ton of touch damage trying to do so, punishing me for bad game design. Assuming that is bad game design. It could be that the CD's messed up, who knows. The levels have a ton of enemies too, making this very difficult to dodge attacks and fight back. The pictures that you can draw totally help, but there's limited ammo for them. This mermaid, for example, makes enemies have heart attacks. This mermaid's actually the only thing I knew about the game going into this, if I'm honest. Saw an old cheat code you could do to see her, memory glands. That's the only thing I ever heard about this game until now. Too bad the ammo of these drawings is incredibly limited. You need paper as well as Woody to be somewhat larger. He gets shorter when he uses them. Then you need to find more pencils to grow, which looks awkward and possibly like an adult action. I'm just saying, lovely. The boss fight wasn't too bad though. Overall, I didn't care for this one, but if jumping on enemies and possibly grabbing ropes was easier, then it would be fine to play. If it comes back with fixes, maybe I'd play it again. Or if I can actually get it running correctly, assuming that that's not the way it's supposed to be run. I hate to say it, this game is so obscure, I'm not actually sure if this is just the game or if I'm doing something wrong. Who knows? Now it's time to look at fighting games. This is a genre I'm not super familiar with, if I'm going to be honest. I know about fighting games, I just don't play them. I had a friend come in and take a look with me on some of these, and it was kind of a disappointing experience, I'm not going to lie. Let's look into the most popular fighting game on the console, Mortal Kombat. I'm not too familiar with the game myself, but my friend certainly was. It played perfectly fine, all things considered, looked decent for the time, and while I don't think it matches up with the arcade version, it worked pretty well. Come to find out, it is pretty close to the original Genesis version, with some musical tracks changed, and a code to turn the gourd down, which is kind of dumb. The real cool thing is, the CD-ROM also played music, which had some new remixes for the music. I said music multiple times there, and I'm not going to change it. Mortal Kombat music was a big deal back in the day. Hell, it still is. Alright, let's try Fatal Fury, the second most popular fighting game circuit on here. Yeah, it's pretty bad when Fatal Fury is the second most popular one here. No offense to Fatal Fury fans, but most people from America aren't super up to date on SNK fighting games like Fatal Fury. But it has its fans too at the same time. It isn't like Fatal Fury isn't popular, but most casual gamers probably won't recognize the name overall. And overall, this port sucks. Looks good, you can jump to different planes to dodge, but the game runs so slow. My friend and I couldn't get into it at all. From what I hear, this is literally the slowest version of the game, making it the worst by default. Well, that sucks. Now, Samurai Showdown, another SNK fighting game, is much less popular, but sadly this is one of the better ones. I'm not sure if it's the best version of the game though. It works though, and looks pretty good all things considered. I had fun with it, and so did my friend, so hey, at least we found one fighting game with some fun to be had. However, there are a few missing characters and no referee to speak of, so that kinda sucks. No fatal finisher moves either. Lastly, we have Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. This one is also fun and functions as an advanced port and a full-blown sequel to the original. I didn't unlock anyone, I suck at the game, but there are tons of new characters in this game, which is awesome. Too bad Eternal Champions is already an obscure fighting game to begin with. It was made in-house by Sega and is actually pretty fun, possibly an underrated gem, making the Sega CD game even more underrated, and also more of a gem. I said try this one out if you're a fan for the first one, and I've always wanted a sequel. If need be, pirate it, since Sega doesn't seem too keen on re-releasing the games for this add-on. Next, let's talk about FMV games. There were a ton on the Sega CD, including the most popular FMV game, Dragon's Lair. But I didn't play this version a lot. It just looks like a watered-down version of the arcade original, which could very well be the case for some of these for sure. FMV, or full-motion video games, are basically a game in which it shows you a video footage, and you have to interact with the footage to play and progress. Think about QuickTime events in, like, Bayonetta or Resident Evil 4, and then pretend that's the entire freaking game, and you'll know why I'm not a fan. Now, Night Trap is a bit more potent of a name. If you've heard of this game and haven't played it, I bet I know why it came up in a conversation. There were two games the Senate talked about when they met about video game violence. One of them was Mortal Kombat, which we've already talked about. The other was Night Trap, though the senator never actually played the game. He talks about the game encouraging you to kill young girls. Well, no, that doesn't happen. You can't even kill the girls. If the game, finds out that you're letting them die, it gets upset. Your job is to watch cameras much like FNAF, but this time you activate traps. The traps only work in the middle of the room, and you have to catch these vampire monsters so they don't kill the kids in the house. The game actively punishes you if you watch the kids too much, but will also punish you for not watching them as well, as they can change security colors on you. Basically, if you are unaware the security color has changed, the traps will suddenly just not work, which is very annoying. The entire game is annoying. There's an HD version which fixes some of these issues, and maybe I'll play it one day, but for now I'm only looking at the Sega CD version, which sucks. But at least Nightwatch has a cult following, despite my distaste of it. Does Time Gal stand up to the challenge and succeed? Not really. This is a lot more like Dragon's Lair, where you watch the scene and press a button suggesting you on the interface to progress. The issue is the interface gives you less than a second to press the actual direction, so you basically have to memorize the scene to even progress. What's worse is the scene you get right away is random. I let my friend play and the game started out in a completely different area. Oops. Also, some of the scenes are somewhat suggestive, so there's something. I like anime, but the dubbing could be better too. The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers game is very weird. It is also like Dragon's Lair, but nothing changes if you mess up. You have a health bar, sure, and you are prompted to do their moves from the screen. However, your mistakes or successes mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. They play the abridged Power Rangers episode that plays in the background no matter what, unless you lose. The game story goes through the Green Ranger origin, which is probably my favorite arc, while also giving you the origins to the original Power Rangers, so that's kind of fun. This is fine, a fun little distraction if you're a Power Rangers fan, but overall, somewhat on the dull side at FMVs, which is already dull in my opinion. I didn't get very far in this one, but Lawnmower Man, a title so weird I had to try it out, is also an FMV game very similar to Dragon's Lair. It is, like some of the others, brutal and unforgiving, but this one is a trip for anyone willing to memorize the patterns here. This guy just turns into a ship with legs, and I'm not sure why you die and see a lawnmower face. The story doesn't make sense to me, honestly. I'd say give this one a try for the weirdness, but I didn't get very far in here either, so yeah. Speaking of Lawnmower Man, the game is actually on both the SNES and Genesis as well. The Sega CD is home to a decent amount of ports. Basically, there's a lot of Genesis games that got ported over to the Sega CD, oftentimes with updated visuals or some extra trinkets and levels. I basically talk about some of these with the fighting games list already, but I'll cover some more here, like a game I might want to fully review one day, Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim is a strange game that was all the rage back in the 90s, but I didn't know it had a second game or even know much about the career-ending third game. Basically, you're an alien, Earthworm, in a large suit armed with a machine gun-like laser of sorts. You fight some weird enemies in boss fights. I personally didn't get very far, I suck at the game, but I hear there are exclusive levels only found in the Sega CD version, so I might keep this one around a bit longer. I also hear that Ecco the Dolphin and its sequel are some of the best versions of those games on the Sega CD. I mostly hear it is easier due to more checkpoints. However, they have different soundtracks and people seem to not like the newer compositions, so that's a bit of a bummer. Again, I'll have to deep dive into this one eventually. Final Fight, meanwhile, is pretty good. Yeah, the CD version is about as close to the arcade version as you got back in the day. It had all the playable characters and all the levels. It mostly didn't have as many enemies on screen. My friend and I played some fun co-op too. I hear this version re-released recently on one of Sega's mini consoles though, so that's kind of cool to hear. Check it out unless you just need the actual arcade version. Now, let's talk about Spider-Man vs. Kingpin. I've never played the game, but from what I can tell, this may be the best version of the game for sure. It's slightly open world, you hunt down supervillains and stop Kingpin, who seems to have a nuke. It's fun, but very difficult, as I got absolutely wrecked by Electro. The Sega CD version has animated cutscenes that, yeah, these don't hold up too well. An effort was made, I guess? Still, maybe check it out if possible. So far, so good. And then we get to Radical Rex. Oh boy. This game is already not the greatest out there, and here we have a port no different than the original Genesis port. Oh sure, you can listen to the soundtrack, but that's about it, really. The game's kind of lame, though. I used to rent this back on the Super Nintendo back in the day, shockingly enough. I didn't get very far, and I think I got farther this time around, but yeah, I'm not going to sit here and play through this one. Okay, let's finish this by talking about Mickey Mouse.
Oh boy, there was a nice history on both SNES and Genesis. But what about the Sega CD?
Well, he got a port of Mickey Mania, The Timeless Adventures of Mickey Mouse. Yeah, it's a long-ass title, but a decent platformer on all consoles at the time. Technically, the best version of this is on the PlayStation, a testament to how late this game actually released on all of these consoles. I think I was gunning for an N64 when this came out, though. Still, a lovely looking game, and until the PS1 version hit, in PAL regions anyway, this was the best version of the game, and the best version we got stateside. Alright, time for everyone's favorite moment of this review, random games! Games that didn't belong in any other categories. These are just 4 games I thought would be cool to play and talk about a bit. Bram Stoker's Dracula, a game that's based on a movie that I've never seen. I know, uncultured swine and all that. Look, I know Keanu Reeves is in it, and that's about it. Regardless, you basically walk to the right and beat up bats and vampires. Yes, with your fists. It's kind of like a beat-em-up game, but I do know this isn't like many other games based on the movie, so that's just weird. Also, jumping on this bridge without dying is next to impossible, making this game hard as obsidian when it comes to completing it. Next. Here we have Star Wars Rebel Assault, a game originally for the PC, but ported to the Sega CD. But I didn't make it very far. You start out training, and for some reason moving to the left or right is just an absolute struggle, making me die right the hell away. Not sure what's wrong, but let's just move on. At least the game looks nice. Let's try a different Star Wars game and play chess? Wow, been a while. Well, this is a simple chess game, but every time a piece is taken, an animation plays. Some of these are slightly brutal too, with Darth Vader murdering Chewbacca or R2-D2. It's a trip to watch. Also, why is Luke a king? He's literally worthless in this game. Somehow Leia is the queen, which makes sense literally, the words king and queen, but not on an actual chessboard. The chessboard, the queen is the most powerful piece, bar none. Vader being a queen next to Palpatine makes sense. He's also the one getting shit done, while Leia was more important to protect. So she should have actually been the king. Also, why is there no Han Solo in this? Next, let's look at the Batman Return games on the Sega CD. I thought it was based on an arcade cabinet, but come to find out it's actually Batman Returns from the Genesis and the SNES, but with driving sections. The driving sections are super fun, but hard at the same time. I never even got to the beat-em-up platforming sections, or I would have put this on ports. I didn't actually realize it was a port until after I was already kind of writing the script and working on it, and yeah, that's my bad. Sorry, guys. Last, we have a treat. Oh yeah, I said 4, meant 5. No problem. Totally can count. I didn't play very far into this, but I wanted to mention Snatcher, an early Hideo Kojima game that I would love ported in English more often. The only place to get this game in English is literally on the Sega CD. This is one of the few games I would recommend immediately to people. The story is wild, and the gameplay is pretty simple. It's a point-and-click style adventure game, but with a controller. But it's still worth a look, especially if you like Kojima games. The writing, you know it's going to be crazy, and you know there's going to be a lot of movie tie-in based ideas. So definitely give that one a look if you kind of know Kojima and his work. So overall, looking back on the Sega CD, it had some decent work put into it. It has some of the best versions of classic games like Earthworm Jim, Ecco the Dolphin, and the sequel, and Mickey Mania, at least for the time. There was fun to be had with some of these fighting games too, but there were a lot of ports that were just the same game, but with the CD-ROM adding a physical soundtrack. However, that doesn't justify buying another copy of the game, and without the internet to tell you which games were advanced ports and which ones were just regular ports, yeah, that's a problem. Some of the exclusive games suck too, and the FMV games are just kind of fun, but only in short bursts. Given I didn't play everything on the Sega CD, I only picked out a handful of games. The only 2 exclusive games on the console worth a damn are the English version of Snatcher and Sonic CD, which I'm going to get to next week. So the Sega CD at the end of the day wasn't really worth the extra money, nor were the games. If you happen to own one, it wouldn't be bad to have some of these games. However, as it stands, people were disappointed with the damn thing, and with some ports being exactly the same, people not understanding which ports were worth it, we may never get those extra levels from Earthworm Jim, see a fixed port of Wild Woody, and I'd be shocked if an updated version of Snatcher ever came out. Unfortunately, the good of the console will die out because the bad was just too much for the thing. Obscurity with the add-on, and a shame too. I had fun with this deep dive with the add-on. Originally, this was supposed to be part of the Sonic CD video, but I looked at too many games, and yeah, we ended up with a larger script, and eventually this turned into a full-blown video. Sure, they were disappointing, but still I had fun kind of checking them out regardless. I recommend you should try some of these as well one day. Hey, I'm not saying play everything I did. I didn't even check out all the games on the console, but it's nice to play some of these for sure. But that's all the time I have for this beast. Like, subscribe, comment, and ring the bell for live updates. It really does help my channel, and I appreciate you guys for watching my content. Until next time, my minions, take care. See you next week as I take on Metal Sonic.